If I turned on my microphone. You're very welcome along to the Sunday paper review brought to you with Screwfix this afternoon. Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. It's Richie here with you, joined this afternoon by the Irish Daily Mail's football correspondent David Sneyd. First time out with us, I think.
It is, yeah, first time.
You're very welcome along. And no stranger to this desk is Bernard Jackman, head coach of the Dragons across in Wales, is making the most of his pre-season break to come in and talk sport with us this afternoon.
Always have a chance to read the papers in here.
Yeah, it gives you an excuse to break away from everything.
Yeah, it is good. We're flying back tonight, so just had a week off, and now we're heading back to August, which is obviously ramp up our pre-season, get ready for our first game of the league, which is Treviso at home, the first week of September. Treviso,
and I think it's Southern Kings.
Yeah, we've got a good draw, in fairness. We've got Treviso, Kings at home, Leinster away, and then Zebra at home. So 3 of our first 4 games are definitely games that we need to target and try and get a good start.
It seems like a very short pre-season this time around. Am I wrong?
Yeah, it's gone quick, but we actually were back the 4th of June.
Okay.
So that's why we were able to give the lads a week off last week. So we've 7 weeks under the belt. But that's because we obviously finished April 28th, whereas the teams who made the knockout stages of the Pro 14 and Europe, and then who had a lot more players involved in international tours, they only finished up the end of June.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's short for them, but I think, in the Irish provinces, the guys who went to Australia would only come back in probably around 3 of the Pro 14 to make sure they get a decent break. Obviously, with World Cup year, it's important that they get 4 or 5 weeks. So some of them get 6 weeks now, because obviously once this starts, it's going to be very intense for the next block.
You've had I was looking through it earlier on, incredibly high turnover of players this time round. Is that your call? Because I know there's a lot of natural kind of retirements and people drifting away from the province, and it just happens.
To be honest, it was pretty much my call. I think if you look at the Dragons over the last 4 or 5 years, on average 4 people kind of moved on each season, which is very rare for a team who hadn't been successful. So the club are much more ambitious than we were in the past, and we felt that it was really important we get the right people in as quickly as possible, and want to try and create the right environment for a lot of our youngsters who are from the region, who we believe have a lot of potential, who we played a lot last year. So yeah, we've 21 players moved out, 14 came in. I suppose now the thing is to try and get that team cohesion as quickly as possible. And that's the challenge for us. We've got a lot more talent than we had, but now we basically got to create team spirit. We got to create understanding, and that's something that we've been a big focus of our pre-season. Not just getting fit, but trying to get the group tight.
What kind of help do you get from the WRU along those lines? I know we spoke before, one of the last times you were in, the first times you were in, we were talking about the challenge you might have had to get maybe a George North on board when it was known that he was going to be coming back to Wales. But obviously the WRU, there has to be some kind of cooperation and to and fro between yourselves.
I think what the WRU, the Dragons have never had the backroom staff that the other regions have, or we take for granted in most professional sports. So what the WRU have done is increase my budget for a backroom team. So now we have a sports psychologist, we have a nutritionist, we have a bigger and better sports scientist team, a better analyst team. So that's been brilliant, and obviously they just make our travel is better. All the little things that make a difference in terms of coaching courses for my coaches and CPD and things like that. So having an owner like the WRU has been a big help to us, because the Dragons were for sale for about 3 or 4 years, and there wasn't that stability. Which is stability in sports is pretty important.
Absolutely is. We found that out no more so than with the Irish women's hockey side. That's a segue, kids. We'll start with the headlines from the sports sections and the back pages today. First of all, with the Sunday Independent, Ireland in Dreamland. Pinder keeps nerve to fire hockey heroes into World Cup final. Gillian Pinder with that decisive penalty stroke yesterday to bring Ireland to that first ever World Cup final, which gets underway at 4:30 in the Lee Valley Centre. It also dominates the back page of the Irish Daily Mail on Sunday. Dreamland. Ireland just 60 minutes from incredible World Cup triumph. And also we see Malachy O'Rourke hugging his players there. Monaghan celebrate. Ulster boys make sure of their place in the semi-finals. It's also all over the front page of the Sunday Times sports section as well today. World in their hands. A fantastic photo there saying Green Machine meet Dutch today for hockey's greatest prize. We also have the news that Eamon Fitzmaurice is stepping down as Kerry manager, as Monaghan into semis, as Kerry boss quits after exit. Back page of the Sunday World. Doomed Kingdom, and Fitzmaurice resigns as boss Peter Crowley crouching there in his hunkers with Eamon Fitzmaurice stepping away. And the Irish women's hockey side just relegated to that left-hand panel. Brilliant girls in green in World Cup final. No such thing as women's hockey in the back page of the Star Sports Sunday. Pog talks on future. Agent Raiola jets in with 100 million Barca offer, and fear we go. Pep's hungry to deliver again. The Community Shield getting underway in what, less than an hour's time over in Wembley. The headline of the day, and by a distance: win that shakes the Farney. Monaghan blitz is end for Fitz. Eamon Fitzmaurice last night quit as Kerry manager after Monaghan's win over Galway knocked the Kingdom out of the championship. And there we see as well Nicola Evans and also Anna O'Flanagan, the goal scoring hero for Ireland yesterday in that 1-0 draw with Spain, ultimately a victory on penalties that sees Ireland take on Holland today. World without end. It's time to clog Dutch is what they go with there on the back page of the Sun, which wins in terms of headlines for sure. A shootout of this world. Ireland's heroes take penalty route to cup final, and also as the selections slip out, Monaghan on over to my place. Farney men in party mood after clinching semi-final spot, but Kerry boss Fitz falls on his sword. And then finally with the Sunday People today, will you swap an Anthony Martial Willian swap deal on the cards potentially, as Jose wants Brazil star for out of favour Martial. And here comes the Sun with Alisson starring for Liverpool, apparently their best passer of the ball in a 5-0 demolition of Napoli in that friendly at the Aviva yesterday. But no room again for the Irish women's hockey side, which I think is unfortunate, David, because they have dominated the weekend and indeed the week from a sporting context. And for those of us who, let's say, weren't necessarily used to covering women's hockey or hockey in general, this has been somewhat of a welcome change this week.
Yeah, it's actually been quite exciting, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Don't think anyone would have expected that, especially with a kind of replay of an All-Ireland semi-final hurling, that this is what's dominating the papers. It's actually just fantastic, and going through all the coverage, it's all over the papers. But I think Eamon Sweeney on the front of the Sindo just sums it up best when he says, "Today Ireland playing in the World Cup final. How great is that?" And it's
that
just
sentence alone, because George Hamilton kept repeating it yesterday in commentary. Ireland in a World Cup final. Like, the rugby sides had gotten to quarterfinals. The football team in 1990 had obviously gotten to that quarterfinal with Italy. Never had to conjure the idea that Ireland of any sort would be in a World Cup final. We've been people trying to correct us on Twitter and stuff there. With the golf World Cup, it doesn't count. It's a team sport. It's a field sport.
It's just brilliant. It's just like, as you say, it's Ireland are in a World Cup final. Like, Ireland could potentially be the best in the world. That's a very major sport. Like, it is. Like, it's not as if it's like 4 or 5 teams in this. This is a major sport, and like all the stuff, social media, people start bringing in if they're getting grants and all this stuff and all the rest. But like, who cares? They're in a final of a World Cup. Like, you listen to the manager Graham Shaw in tears. The players, they're finding it hard to describe. Listen to Graham Shaw, it's all over the papers, and today in page 82, his own daughter had no interest in hockey, even leading up to the World Cup. And now all of a sudden she wants to play hockey, his own daughter. So it's just fantastic.
Like, anecdotally, Bernard, you see pictures and videos all over like Instagram and Twitter of people's kids, essentially, and young girls is what jumped out at me as well, who are watching on yesterday, and this is being used as a huge role model thing for, it shows that what women's sport is capable of in this country. It shows what sport in this country, full stop, is capable of producing on a world level in this country.
We watched it in my house yesterday, and my wife and kids were jumping around when we got the winning penalty, and I tuned into this when Ireland played England, which was a dead rubber, but what I was struck by was they lost the game, but they'd already qualified, but was just how much the team were actually visually enjoying it.
Yeah.
The anthem, the smiles, the laughter, the camaraderie, and they just seem to have really gelled and used all the I suppose the hard luck stories and the heartbreak that's happened to them over the last 6 or 7 years, because there's a huge amount of this team who've been through that.
Yeah.
Anna O'Flanagan, she became Ireland's joint leading scorer yesterday with her goal. She's on a leave of absence from McCann Fitzgerald to play in Holland in a pro league, but it wouldn't be for financial gain. It's just to get her at the level required to go to a World Cup like this and do her country proud. And I think throughout the team, I'm sure every one of them have similar stories of sacrifice and to see, and often that goes in vain, Yeah. But now it's like the perfect storm. They've gelled together. They obviously have incredible teamwork and team spirit, but obviously have a really good talent, good strategy, and they've come from being the second worst ranked team to now being in the final. It's a fairy tale story.
From a head coach's point of view, it's that intangible that I'd imagine you're looking on with real envy when you see how relaxed and how much they enjoy each other's company, and how they're in a World Cup, they're in a World Cup final, and yet they just seem like they're just on a weekend away, but also delivering the results.
Yeah, and
on the other side
used to that. If the Netherlands had that attitude because they're number one ranked in the world, and you could say, well, they're used to being under pressure, they're used to being in high pressure environments. This team, obviously they've tapped into the underdog mentality, but usually you don't see underdogs having that free spirit and that level of enjoyment. And I think what Graham Shaw has obviously created, and part of the skill is getting a team to play at a level which outweighs the sum of the parts, and this team obviously have done that. You don't go in there ranked 15th and get to a final unless people or players perform above the level they've done in the past. And I think that's his story and the insights into how they created that type of team spirit and the leadership group, and how they designed that is going to be fascinating, because it's an Irish success story that we should all be very proud of, and I suppose try and learn from, particularly from a coaching point of view. I think I'm definitely going to. I followed them on Twitter the other day, and I'm definitely going to try and grab them for a coffee next time I'm home.
Yeah, it's been amazing to me how giving of their time they've been as well. I mean, we played a clip of Roisin Upton from yesterday. An hour after they'd gotten through to a World Cup final, was speaking to us on the show. Graham Shaw himself has spoken to us, I think, twice, possibly even 3 times over the course of the last week. That, to me, is just remarkable. A sense of, yes, we were doing well, but we also need to get as many people on board and as many people behind us as we humanly can during the course of this week.
Well, it just makes...
While we're visible, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, it just makes sense as well, because obviously it is a minority sport. It's not like dominating like the headlines put until now. Obviously, like Tommy Conlon made the point as well, where he says the fickle joy of sport. One day the nation doesn't know that it has a women's hockey team representing at the World Cup. The next day it finds out it's doing rather well. So there is that element as well, where like there's no kind of, you see with the England football team at the World Cup when they were a bit more open and trying to kind of right some of the wrongs of the past, when maybe they thought the press were against them. They obviously have none of this kind of those feelings, and it's just great. But just going back to what Bernard was saying, like the quote here from Anna O'Flanagan when she says, once we got to the quarterfinals, we said we're here to win it. So they knew at that stage that, well, yeah, they're here to enjoy it, and you see them after Ireland's call, and they're smiling and they're waving to the crowd, and you can tell they're enjoying it and they're going to kind of savour it. But like that quote is quite telling, from the sense of they weren't just there to just keep on enjoying it, they were there to actually get to the final, and they've now done it. So it's just great testament to them.
And they're keen to talk up just the pure sporting aspect of it as well, because anytime we've spoken to them, one of the quotes that jumped out at me about Shaw, particularly because we see this line trotted out pretty much throughout the week, is that they all have to contribute €550 each to play for Ireland, that their funding is X from Sport Ireland, and they have to try and make the most of it, blah blah blah. He's always said no excuses, that they can't lean on any of those issues. They can't lean on the fact that they're not as well funded as other teams in the competition are. They can't lean on the fact that they haven't got as much time together as potentially some of the other teams have. They just have to put in the work when they are there, and the results hopefully will come out the other side of it. And this is just the best possible example of it. Yeah,
and I think he could have easily, used. I think certain coaches in the past we've seen examples of, would have used that as a way of saying to the governing body, you need to back us. They haven't done that. I think it's been commendable, and also I think obviously they've got to try and promote a sport that doesn't get the media column or the inches that others do, but we shouldn't take for granted that it's an easy thing to do. The easy thing to do here is say, listen, we've got a World Cup final in 24 hours. We need to go home and recover. And Limerick last week, so straight away, let's not create any hype around the team. These guys, this group of people are comfortable with that, and they're reveling in it, and they're not letting it affect their performance. And even look at it, I spoke to Vincent Hogan a couple of months ago, and he was saying how the GA landscape has changed. Trying to be a feature writer in the GA, back 15-20 years ago, he could be in the Tipperary dressing room, after a game, getting sound bites, whereas now it's really strictly managed. And I think in all of us, in all sports, we've got an obligation to try and put our best foot forward and be open and let people see what's happening in our game and try and promote it, because hockey now is going to get a huge boost out of this, because they've done, they are role models.
and the men's side competing in a World Cup finals in December as well. So I was like, doesn't that not small matter as well later on in the year. So the whole profile of the thing has been boosted. Like, in terms of the interaction with the public and the interaction with the media, like, what's the Bernard Jackman diktat from on high in Dragons? Like, would you take a kind of a looser approach, or?
Yeah, no, I say to our players that they're all CEOs of their own business, you know, of a one-man business, and so that means obviously there's different elements to that. It's your physical preparation, your mental preparation, your hydration, nutrition, but also how the image you portray of yourself, because we don't have a huge amount of high-profile players. We hope they become high-profile players, but I think it's important that they portray themselves and are open and transparent, and use every opportunity they can to try and, I suppose, sell themselves, you know, and show what they're about, and what they're motivated by and who they represent, etc. So now we're really open. I think it's really important, and I think, you know, I always say we have a huge amount of guest coaches come visit us from different sports. Stephen Poacher, the Carlow football coach, was over 2 weeks ago, for example. But you know, all our players are more than welcome, or our coaches are more than welcome to invite people in their network to come and spend a day with us, 2 days with us, because I think it's just a really good thing to do from a learning point of view, for us, for sharing our expertise and our knowledge. But also, it creates pressure on us to have an environment that, if you brought your dad to watch you train for the day, what's he going to think going home in the car? You know, is he going to be impressed? Is it very professional? Are we committed? So we're trying to be really open, transparent, but, you know, for two parts. One is to kind of give our players an opportunity to develop those social skills, and also, you know, to kind of put pressure on us to make sure that we're creating a high performance environment and living that day in, day out.
Yeah, it's the very embodiment, I suppose, of what sport should be about. When you see a team performing well, you see a connection with the public, and you see an openness from their side to actually speak about what they're doing, and not in a self-aggrandizing way, but just in a, well, so this is what happened, and they're all too happy to explain what's going on in the game of hockey, this team. And I know from personal experience as well that the men's side are exactly the same. They just want to get it out there. And even this notion yesterday, you kind of see people jumping on the bandwagon, is always something that sits uncomfortably with me, because I always love when these sports pop up in prominent positions on TV or even on radio as well by themselves, is that this could be the first exposure to any sport that some 5-6-year-old kids would have, and suddenly they latch on to that, whether it's they're latching on to hockey, whether it's latching on to hurling, whether it's latching on to Gaelic football or golf or whatever, that they're engaging with sport, that they're seeing something very tangible, and an Irish success story on top of that is just all the better.
Well, this is it. It's like people who are watching this hockey team, some of them will go out now and want to play hockey, but as you say, they could want to go out and play any other sport. They could just be inspired by it. Just speaking in terms of that kind of, like, the openness, like, that's what you want to hear now. You're going to hear some great stories now over the next while of the players coming back, getting like interviews, because it's not going to be a problem, and you just want to find out more about them. You, like Bernard mentioned earlier, about sacrifice isn't always, you don't always get your rewards for it. Now, hopefully these women will, and if they win the World Cup later on today, like, it's just going to change their lives. But you want to find out more about them, and you want to kind of hear their stories and what they've been through. And as a journalist, I'm kind of going to speak to, when it's footballers or whatever, that's what you want to find out about. You want to find out what's got you there, how have you got there, kind of what you've been through. Some people might want to talk about their stories, some people might not. But that's what you want. You just want to be able to have a conversation, as Bernard was saying about the players coming in, which I found quite interesting, about watching training and the lads being kind of open to that and actually want to have a conversation with you. That's just what you want as speaking as a journalist.
It's manna from heaven for you.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Like, and like, hopefully there might be a few hockey correspondence jobs going now as well, but you never know. But like, it's just, it's, as a journalist and someone, when I know from when I'm going to speak to whoever it is, obviously you want to talk to them about their sport, but you're just interested in their actual life and what they've been through. And like 99 times out of 100, that's what you get the interesting stuff out of. It's not so much what happens on the pitch, because all due respect, you might not know what's going on in terms of hockey, you understand it, but you just want to know more about these women.
Well, this is the thing, it kind of broadens sports desks as well, because, you know, it's all too easy, and we're guilty of that as anybody, of getting into that trench of football, rugby, GAA, and, you know, you'll cover everything when it kind of comes in front of you. But to be able to cover multiple sports, I mean, this is the kind of thing that a sports journalist kind of dreams of doing when they're like, you know, teenagers, that they wouldn't get involved in sport. You go and cover anything, you'd be thrown off to, I don't know, to Holland or to Brazil or to wherever. You could be covering any sports and do it well. That's your goal, I'd imagine.
Well, that was, I remember when I started kind of working in the, say, the Lucan Gazette, it would have been, and you'd go to, say, kind of Stewart's Hospital and stuff like that, and go covering hockey matches, and I'd cover rugby matches and stuff, and that didn't work out very well for me. But like, and you just go to all these different sports, and that's what gets you hooked as much as anything. Like, you have maybe your focus and stuff, but when you see kind of, as you say, kind of just what people go through to actually play, like even say the €550 and stuff, like, regardless of whether or not they were able to afford it or whatever, the fact that they were willing to actually do that just to play, this is their reward, a little bit, you know, and you just have to take your hat off to them.
It's kind of that tone that made me really love Tommy Collins' piece in the Sindo today, saying it's a stunning denouement to the summer. Irish hockey, a hardly perennial that has endured decades of indifference, came in from the cold yesterday. It's always heartening to see minority sports get their day in the sun. Yesterday it was positively life-affirming for the players and for the families. The last few weeks have surely been the trip of a lifetime, the culmination in some cases of a life in sport, a lifetime's work in the sport they love, and that's ultimately all anybody wants. And best of luck to them. A 4:30 start to that one. As I mentioned, Stephen Doyle will be there for us a little bit later on this afternoon. It's hard to look away, Dave, from the start of the Premier League because we're 5 days, because it starts on a Friday with Manchester
Starts on a Friday night,
and Leicester.
And the Community Shield is on later on as well.
3 o'clock starts at that one. Premier League previews, who's gotten it right, who's gotten it wrong?
Well, obviously that's what it is. It's just general previews. Obviously, Kevin Kilban is in my paper in the Mail on Sunday.
He's a fantastic journalist.
He is. He's brilliant. He
is just great.
Doesn't keep great company, but no. In fairness, and then Kevin's piece is pretty much the same as Graham Souness's as well. Everyone is pretty much saying it's Man City's title. Liverpool are going to finish second, but that this season that there's obviously a bit more pressure on Jurgen Klopp because of the money he spent, which is understandable. But say with Kilban, like the headline was a roll up for the Klopp and Pep show. But obviously he mentions Jose Mourinho as well, which you can't get away from. It's a mix, isn't it? It's like kind of just negativity and just whinging from Mourinho, and on the other side of things you have Klopp and his new teeth, and he's always smiling, and just Guardiola and what he's done last year. It's just a great massive contrast, really.
I don't know, maybe I find it odd that you wouldn't see necessarily a Pro 14 preview being built on the battles between yourself and Leo Cullen, or yourself and Jan Grobler, or anybody else. It's weird that the managers take front and centre for all of the previews, pretty much, for the Premier League.
They become the dominant force, really, in those big clubs, and obviously they've all got different ways of handling the media. The problem with Mourinho is, for me, and I'm no expert on it, but it seems that he's going down that negative route. I mean, you know, we were just chatting beforehand. His net spend is 302 million. You know, and this squad should start to be a reflection of him. It's all well and good the first year saying, you know, I inherited a squad that doesn't suit my style of play, or don't have the same outlook on culture that I want. But if you spent net spend of 302 million, he spent over 390 million on transfers. I mean, you'd want to be getting close to a squad that's a mirror image of you, and you should be pretty confident that your team is ready to go to war. I just wonder, is he trying to create a scenario where, you know, if it doesn't work, he feels he can blame the board? I don't know. It's just it's a strange one. You know a lot more about it than me, David, but it certainly doesn't. If I was United, I am a United fan, but
I didn't know that. We wouldn't have.
I've drifted away a little bit from the game, but it does seem to be a worrying situation with him and his mindset at the moment.
Would these previews this week grab you? If you're like on the fence as regards whether you're going to involve yourself in a new Premier League season this year, would like reading through the Pep versus Klopp stuff, or whether or not Jose's in the mood?
As a sports nut, Pep probably grabs you more, and Klopp a little bit. They're more.
There's more layers.
More layers, more charismatic. They seem to have a better connection with their team. I mean, I'm fascinated by this new Amazon Prime documentary behind the scenes in Man City and things like that. So Mourinho, the negative kind of egotistical way he portrays himself at the moment, it's not really interesting for me, you know. But the other two definitely are. are more fascinating, and I probably follow them more than Mourinho this year.
Yeah, well, in terms of how Liverpool went last year, they did fall off under Klopp, but maybe that was down to the Champions League. Graham Souness makes a very good point. Like, the players that they've bought, it's midfielders. Obviously, they bought the goalkeeper Alisson, which was a big one. But he's also like brought in, was it Naby Keita, Fabinho? He wanted Nabil Fekir as well. And Souness was quite right in saying that Klopp's now going to have a bit of an issue on his hands now with those midfielders. He has very solid types in there with Jordan Henderson. Who else is in there now? Was James Milner? Obviously, Georgie Wijnaldum. Klopp has a job now to try and keep some of those happy. What you were saying about does that grab you? Like, there's no sort of major kind of sensational interview in terms of the previews, but it's just sort of it's a week out from it. It's setting the scene. Next week it'll all be, I think Sky Sports are doing their launch on Tuesday. I think in England as well. But I'm just looking.
When you see 40,000 people turning up to Liverpool Napoli yesterday, and you see the same for Arsenal Chelsea, it's not as if it's in poorly health at the moment. No, it's not. Like, and what the tone of the previews have said, it's personality driven. Like, and this is one of the interesting things I think with this season is you're looking at it. Liverpool, City, they're two teams who play great football as well. So it's set up to be will be Mourinho. Mourinho, I think, will still dominate the season one way or the other. It'll either be he's going to blow up and he'll be gone by Christmas, or he could actually get this United team playing, and United could maybe cause a bit of a shock. Like, they did finish second last year. There has been progress, but there's also an interesting point from Souness which did make me laugh. He refers to Mahrez, who's Man City's record signing, 60 odd million, and says he can make an impact off the bench, and he's a bit of a kind of a trick. Like, that's your record signing. And he also makes a very good point, considering this is someone who won league titles, won 3 in a row at Liverpool in the 80s, and then obviously went to manage them. That Guardiola is coming from where he can just throw on a couple of players here and there. He doesn't need to now, after what he's already done, go out and maybe sign 4, 5, 6 players, as what Liverpool have done. That you have players coming into a settled kind of way of doing things, and that can kind of be a benefit, because one player isn't going to solve all your woes, which is what Mourinho seemed to think with a defender, that if he gets a defender, that's going to suddenly solve everything for him. It's evolution, not revolution.
Exactly.
If you're going to go down the David Brent route. Let's check in with events at Semple Stadium. Galway and Clare, 28 minutes deep into this game, Daithí Regan, and we have ourselves a semi-final.
Yeah, it's Clare trying to get back into the game after 28 minutes. Galway are leading by a goal and 9 to 5 points, and by far the dominant side. Forwards are playing very well. David Burke is having an absolute stormer in the middle of the field. Daithí Burke is playing a brilliant game full back. Joe Canning had a great start with 2 points, 3 first scores actually, 2 points, 1 from a free. And the goal came, and 19th minute, Jonathan Glynn, just a short puck out, hit to Joe Cooney, who started left half back, and Niall Burke has replaced Garage McInerney. Just delivered a route one ball to the edge of the square, 80 yards to the edge of the square. Glynn didn't take it in the hand, put the hurl up, controlled it, turned, and from 6 yards out gave Donald Toohey no chance. Galway have gone to town on Clare's puck outs. Obviously last week Clare had won 27 or 29 from the second half till the very, very end of extra time. Totally different this time. Galway are just a lot of movement on the Clare puck outs, forcing mistakes. Whelan is playing out centre forward. Joe Canning has gone to wing forward. Just massive movement from the Galway forwards. The physicality is telling. And on the Clare side, really, only Shane O'Donnell up front is making any inroads. Clare really need a goal to get them back into the game. They've hurled nowhere near at any stage in this first half like they did last week, and that'll be a huge worry. Their touch is very much off, but it's as good as we've seen from Galway, a little bit like the replay against Kilkenny. This is a superb first half from the All-Ireland champions.
Good stuff, Daithí. We'll be back over to you at half-time. 1-9 to 5 points is Galway's advantage at the moment. Meanwhile, in the Air Grade Under-20 football final, it's still advantage Kildare. They're heading for victory over Mayo this afternoon. A short time ago, leading by 117 to 114. We'll have more on hurling and indeed Eamon Sweeney on gambling in sport after these.
Off the ball on News Talk. Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Coming up this week, we take a look at the top tech to keep your house safe this summer. From connected sensors to video doorbells, we'll have a rundown on what you need to know.
Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Download the podcast now or tune in this evening at 6.
On News Talk.
Fatigue is a factor in 1 in 5 fatal crashes on Irish roads, so you simply can't ignore the signs. If you're feeling tired, you have to take action. Stop the car somewhere safe. Sip a coffee and sleep. Take a 15-minute nap. This will give you a little more time on the road, another hour or so. Remember, if you're feeling tired, stop, sip, sleep. But if you're chronically fatigued, a good night's sleep is the only cure. From the Road Safety Authority.
Whether you're travelling to the UK,
please mind the gap,
or heading stateside,
stay clear of the closing doors.
Don't forget to pick up your sterling or US dollars commission-free at your local post office. Get it in cash or on our PostFX currency card. It's up to you. Available from selected post offices. Terms and conditions apply. See onpost.ie/FX for details. PostFX currency card is issued by R. Rayfield & Sons plc, trading as Rayfield Bank and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority in the United Kingdom and regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland for conduct of business rules and is permitted to issue e-money.
Okay, Italiano time.
It's a boy. Congratulations.
Un ragazzo. Ancora.
It's a boy. Watermelon.
Ugh.
Luckily, My Taxi is the same in every language, and you can use the app in 9 countries all over Europe. Just touch down and tap. It's holiday time with My Taxi.
I've stretched marketing budgets since I got my first job 40 years ago. Now I'm retiring, I'm going to stretch the joints of my fellow retirees as a qualified yoga instructor.
Retirement is not an end. It's the start of something new. At Standard Life, we've been working with financial advisors to help Irish people enjoy their second lives their way for over 180 years. Whoever your pension is with, talk to your financial advisor today about choices you can make to live your best second life with Standard Life. There's a lot to look forward to. Standard Life Assurance Limited is authorised by the Prudential Regulation Authority in the UK and is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland for conduct of business rules.
At Centra, we're celebrating summer with fantastic offers across the store. Get grilling with Mix and Match barbecue meats, 3 for €10. Fresh summer berries perfect for picnics, 2 for €5. And we have great summer wine offers, like Connoisseur Bicicleta Sauvignon Blanc, only €9. Centra, live every day. Enjoy golf sensibly.
I'm telling you, I've the winning ticket right here.
I will live Sam for sure this year.
He'll definitely ask this weekend. You better get your nails done.
Few things in life are truly guaranteed. With Volkswagen Financial Services, our personal contract plans guarantee the minimum future value of your car. And that's just one of the many benefits that come with our PCP. To find out more, visit your local authorised Volkswagen, Audi, Seat, Skoda or Volkswagen commercial vehicle retailer or visit vwfs.ie/PCP. PCP is offered by Volkswagen Bank GmbH Branch Ireland, authorised by the Federal Financial Supervisory Authority in Germany and regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland for conduct of business rules. Terms and conditions apply.
Want to springboard your computing career? CCT College is now enrolling for its QQI validated Level 8 Higher Diploma in Science in Computing part-time course. Our next open night is on Tuesday the 21st of August from 5 to 8 p.m. As a springboard funded ICT conversion course, places are limited for eligible participants. Apply now. Call 016333 444 or visit cct.ie.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.
Yep, welcome back. It's Richie here with you with the pay-per-view. Bernard Jackman, the Dragons head coach, joins me in the football correspondent for the Irish Daily Mail, David Sneyd, as well. Back page of the Sunday Independent, Eamon Sweeney, bookies won't kill their golden goose. He's writing about, he basically in response to President Higgins last week, saying that he's very concerned about gambling. If I had my way, the President said, I wouldn't have advertising or any access to gambling platforms in sport at all. I really worry when I read the cases. I visited Hope House in Mayo recently, who have been a great assistance to some people and who've got over what it is, hopefully a terrible temporary problem. I think in a way we should protect our sports by keeping them free from this kind of stuff. It's led to Eamon Sweeney writing about it today in a fairly extensive piece, and there's lots of good stuff in it. It's a tricky one to tackle because it's now basically so interlinked, the gambling industry with sport. When you look at the amount of ads that buffer football matches, ourselves obviously with our own tie-ins, Boyle Sports, and even the amount of jerseys across the top 2 divisions in England in particular.
It's like 60%.
60% of jerseys are sponsored by gambling companies, and moreover, gambling companies that for the most part don't necessarily operate within the UK.
Well, what you said there, how it's so interlinked, that's one of the main points of Eamon's piece, is the bookies are the ones who, through their advertising, have made it so interlinked that he's making the point that it's almost as if you can't go to a match without putting a bet on, or and it's just that it's part of it. And like the pull quote that's in the piece, like over half of 16-year-olds have gambling apps on their mobile phones, which is just mental when you think about it. Like, not even on the legal age they gamble, and they have the apps. And then you read, went to the section of the piece where he talks about it, and over 60% of English teenagers surveyed thought that the gambling ads made it look fun, and 49% of them thought it was a good way to make money. Like, that's scary stuff. Like, that really is like scary stuff. And I know it's been talked about kind of widely, but one of the main points of Eamon's piece, which he has hit the nail on the head, is that gambling companies have now made it as if it is part of the sport.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's just,
it's something we spoke about. I think it was with Joe's conversation with Davy Russell, whereby we were talking about how the sport of horse racing, for instance, isn't spoken about as a sport. It's spoken about as ways for Joe Public to make some money off a random animal being ridden by a man in a course in Kildare. You know, it's not necessarily, we're not looking into how that horse got to where he or she is, or how that jockey got to where he or she is. It's essentially just a bunch of numbers on a page, and you're hoping that the numbers come out in your favour. It almost adds an inhuman element to sport. And when you add into that as well the idea that somebody's operating an app whereby the money doesn't really exist. It's operating in this netherworld where you've got an account with a balance, and you've got the balance being put on such and such, and you're hoping that all comes in, and it doesn't happen. But ultimately it has massive and can have massive consequences for people. And I don't know, Eamon points out he doesn't know if there's the political will to tackle it in this country in the same way that Micheál Martin, say, banned tobacco advertising and sponsorship in this country, when you think that, the Benson Hedges Irish Masters was a thing, the Embassy snooker across in the UK was these were how you spoke about these things, whereby the brands were attached to the sports, but you didn't necessarily want to pick up a fag packet because Embassy were sponsoring the snooker, whereas this seems cuter, it's more developed in the way that advertising has worked in the last decade and a half, whereby it actually has become a massive problem in sport, Bernard.
Yeah, it seems that they're just hooking into the next generation so much more than that probably we were affected by it or influenced by it. I mean, for me, that's the most shocking figure, probably a stat I've heard in a long time, that over half of 16-year-olds have gambling apps on their phone. If you don't probably download something to your phone unless you're actually using interest in it. You know what I mean? So that shows that there's been there's been transfer from all that money spent on sponsorship and advertising, etc. And we've obviously had some high-profile cases in Gaelic games where players have come out and spoken about their difficulties with it. So. But it's the problem is so many sports so many teams in England, particularly in the football example you gave, Richard, are so reliant on that money, and who has got the will or the balls to go and fight and push against it.
It's even a real subtle thing because even with the League of Ireland, when they sold their coverage rights to Track Champ, which is like it was viewed as a massive financial boost to Irish clubs. But then again,
you had to have a betting account to be able to watch.
Exactly.
And you had to use it, so you couldn't even just open it. It had to be an active account. See, this is one of them where there'll be people listening and it could be the same. You can put on a few bob and accumulator and it's not a bother to you, and you can go about your business. That's grand. But the point that Eamon is making, and it just bears it even with those stats, it's just like, say just with Australia, so he makes the point here, in Australia banned all gambling ads between 5 a.m. and 9:30 p.m, so around sport. Like if you watch a Premier League match when the Premier League starts, or any football match, like the ad just before the match starts is for a gambling company, and like what's one of the slogans, it matters more when there's money on it. No, it doesn't. Like they want you to believe that, but it doesn't. And then there's other ads on telly and how they do it, it's sickening really. And like even just when you read the piece, and this is the point that he keeps on making, is that they've just become so interlinked with the sport, and that's the scary bit. Look at it from the newspaper's point of view as well, and kind of whether it's radio, TV, they are the ones spending the money. When like newspapers need advertising revenue, and if a gambling company is coming to you, they're going to take the ad. It's still legal and it's still there, and they're the ones who are spending the money. So it is going to have to take kind of action from the government in that instance, because nothing's going to change until something like that happens,
Hold that thought for a second, because it's half-time in Thurles. Galway with the advantage at half-time. Daithí Regan over Clare. They really have started this game brightly of the tribesmen. Dahi is not there. We will get back to Dahi Regan at Thurles, because I can tell you that Galway are indeed in charge at the break, 1-9 to 6 points, so double scores in favour of Galway. There is obviously the element, and I've seen gambling issues up close, Bernard, and they're not pretty. They do have, as Eamon points out in this piece, lots of consequences. Marriages have ended, children have gone hungry, and people have cracked up under the strain of it all. The addict might be the most visible victim, but he's never the only one. As David points out, it's not illegal. At some point, people have to be adults as well, but there is, it's an addiction at the end of the day. Like, he points out that obviously sports people have had massive problems with these, given the amount of downtime that you'd have as especially a professional sports person. Is there any coaching in terms of what a club can do, especially
I think we've all read the soccer autobiographies back, the Brian Robsons, etc., where they're finished at midday and they went to the pub or to the bookies to play pool or have a few bets. I think that's probably changed now because of the profile of the players. They'd never be seen dead in a betting shop, the soccer players and the high profile athletes, but the problem is that they can do it from their car, they can do it from home,
do it under multiple aliases, exactly, if you're certain footballers.
Exactly. So what we have in Wales is the Players Association. They educate players on the dangers of it and the chances of addiction and obviously the fact that betting on rugby is illegal, and just try and make them aware of case studies of other athletes who've gone into trouble. But some people learn the hard way by being burnt, and other people are very very aware of it. But all we can do is try and educate them from a coaching point of view, and making sure that they're aware that it's an issue that can get in on them, and if it does, it's very serious.
I'd be interested to see if that issue of, I know you mentioned that you can't bet on rugby because that's illegal. Football's the same. They're all obviously all different kinds of sports that say you can't bet in your own sport. Does it almost make it worse in a way, because you're have free rein to go and bet on stuff that you're not familiar with and think that you have a hold on, and ultimately that's where bookies thrive on, is that people throw money on stuff that they might necessarily know a great deal about, and that's how they make their millions.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Just separate to that, even this week, I've seen it in the papers today, but there was a story, John Terry was in negotiations to become an ambassador with a bookmaker, and then that would mean that he would have to stop playing football, which when you look then at the amount of clubs who are actually sponsored by bookies, it just seems like a total contradiction.
Where's the line,
Exactly, looking at it from a point of view of, let's say these betting companies are spending don't know how many millions every year with sponsoring clubs. There is definitely a contradiction there. If a club kind of has the information and stuff like that, not getting too deep into it, but there definitely has to be that line. And what Bernard mentioned earlier about kind of obviously before you go into a bookies, and obviously now players can be on their phones. That's even the same with ads. You see the ads for some of the companies, and I won't say the name of the company, but it makes it out as if it's this secret society that it's people, you see the ad kind of in the shadows a little bit or whatever, and makes it even trying to seem more exciting. That's clearly kind of targeting a certain type of individual who could be a younger person on their phone. And it's going to take political will to change it,
Yeah, there is. I'd imagine there's probably an element as well that people are thinking that these are adults and they can possibly make these decisions for themselves. But it strikes me as
smoking. They banned cigarettes. But
they could point to definable health issues as the reason for that, and they could go, listen, you can't be advertising such and such within a certain realm because
this can lead to serious, as it's mentioned, serious kind of mental health issues with so many people. So. Definitely needs to be more kind of discussion about it, especially politically,
Yeah, a discussion about it, I absolutely agree. And action, because as things stand, the status quo, what always worries me, it's probably nothing, but it always worries me, the amount of those companies, as mentioned, that are on jerseys, say, for Crystal Palace's jersey, you almost can't read sponsor.
You've probably never heard of them either.
I've never heard of them. What's in it for them? It seems like there's, I don't know, some back channel kind of stuff that you'd almost have concerns about as well. On top of that, Dahi is at Semple Stadium, half-time, and Galway in the ascendancy. Dahi, you said during the week to Joe that Micheál Donoghue had some big conversations to have, particularly with his forwards. They've stepped up from this afternoon.
Yeah, they have. Individually, they've been actually very good. Particularly impressed with Conor Whelan. He's really kind of playing centre forward, but popping up all over the forward line. He's very, very strong on the ball, very, very pacey, and he's got a couple of great scores. Similarly, again, Jonathan Glynn is a real handful when they can get it down to him. The goal was just prime example of that. Very, very difficult to stop someone 6'5", 6'6" when he plants himself one on the ground as the ball was coming in, and he really just did the basics with it, planted himself on the ground, protected a defender between him and the ball, took it in the hand, kind of pushed him to one side, and all in the one movement buried it in the back of the net, which just really copper fastened exactly where Galway are at in this game. It's really predicated on an absolutely superb defensive performance, every single one of them. Joseph Cooney, normally we know him as a wing forward, slotted back at ease into left half back, and Niall Burke has come into the forward line, but Aidan Hart and Pádraig Mannion have been superb. The two cornerbacks, Toohey and Hanbury, they're winning absolutely everything, and Daithí Burke has given a masterclass at full back, to the extent that Clare have had to move John Conlon out to right half forward. What's a real interesting stat is that actually for the last 18 minutes, the game finished at half time on the 38th minute. Galway's last score came in the 20th minute from Glen. They haven't scored in 18 minutes, but the problem is Clare now are dropping so many numbers back. They're just playing very short puck outs, throwing it around their defence, and the only two players up in the forward line had been Shane O'Donnell and John Conlon. And there was about 6 Galway defenders between the Clare striker in the defence who was hitting it and the two boys isolated inside, and ball after ball has just been picked up easily. So Clare are operating pretty much without a half forward line, and they can't get the distance on the ball to actually hit Conlon in, and when he does, Daithí Burke is beating them all ends up. So it's why it's led to a low scoring first half. Galway are happy and content to mine scores every 5 or 6 minutes when they get it, and they have enough class up there to be able to do it. They not only have physicality in their defence, but Niall Burke is a big man, Joe Canning is very strong, Glynn is, all of the forwards are capable of one-on-one winning a ball. Every time it's down the other end of the field, Clare need it spread out wide of them. They're not comfortable with something coming down 50-50 because they've just been eaten alive on that. So it took on the mould of last week in many respects, in that Galway created their 7-8 point lead early, but the difference has been a lack of response from Clare, and Galway really just going to town on their puck out, happy to let Clare take a puck out to the 21, and then they just, Galway forwards push up then trying to force a clearance, and the long clearances are just been eaten up the far side. So you know, there's no doubt Clare are going to need a goal. They've brought Ian Galvin on the 30th minute. I'm surprised that Aaron Shanahan hasn't come on yet. I would be surprised.
We're going to be seeing him sooner rather than later.
I would think so. I would think so. But what's a real difference today, guys, is just Galway's physicality totally is just to be seen. The difference in bulk, the difference in size, the difference when a 50-50 ball is there to be won. I mean, there's no David Burke. Some of his touches in the middle of the field are fantastic. Little flicks and touches off the hurl. He's a wonderful hurler and a brilliant fella to look at. And Tony Kelly has had a lot of wides. Clare have had 11 in the first half in total. Some of them have been horrendous. Line balls going wide, you know, over the end line, and no forward but inside. So for an All-Ireland semi-final replay, they tend to take on, you know, different to the first game, and this has been a huge disappointment so far. But Galway are really, really impressive. They're just suffocating the life out of Clare.
Very quickly, Daithí, how can Clare change things going into the second
I think
period?
they need to get Shanahan on, and I think they need to do and try and do what they did last week. Just get quicker ball in. They're hitting it from 30 yards from their own goals, and they're trying to hit it the length of the field to Conlon, and it's coming up short every time. And either Toohey or Hanbury or Aidan Hart or one of them is just there. And the amount of balls like the Galway spare man has picked up. And on the other side, unfortunately from Clare, what worked for them last week with Colin Galvin sitting back in the pocket, and he was distributing ball brilliantly. He's getting on ball, but unfortunately when he looks up, it's only two forwards, because Galway are bunching the middle third, forcing him to hit it very long. But the full back line of Galway have just been superb. Again, I would go with two guys. I think they've got to man at least two guys on the half forward line. They're afraid to puck it out long in the Galway half back line, and probably rightly so, because Duggan has been really, really quiet. Tony Kelly's in and out of it. Like I say, David Reedy was taken off again. O'Donnell is so gutsy. He's shown for everything. He's won a couple of frees. He got a great score, and he's the one dynamic forward that Clare have. And I watched him in a small cameo earlier on when it was a line ball for Clare. He had Pádraig Mannion and Adrian Toohey standing beside him, and he looked absolutely tiny compared to them, and yet ball is landing down on top of his head. But he's been really, really game. He's the only bright light up front for Clare so far. That's not enough in an All-Ireland semi-final, but great credit to the All-Ireland champions. They're playing like champions.
Okay, Dahi Regan will be back over to you during the course of the second half. Galway in the ascendancy, leading by double scores at the break. Meanwhile, Kildare have won the first ever Airgrid All-Ireland Under-20 Football Championship, beating Mayo by 118 to 116. We are continuing the pay-per-view here. David Sneyd from the Irish Daily Mail as well as also Bernard Jackman, the head coach of the Dragons, is alongside us as well. And buried amongst the medals in the water, between the pool and the rowing for Ireland in Glasgow, and the Irish success story that has been the Women's World Cup in London. Some Irish coach by the name of Ronan O'Gara has won the Super Rugby Championship with Crusaders. He keeps on going, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's incredible. Obviously, very few Irish coaches have been able to get into Super Rugby or made the jump down there. And
they don't take blow-ins well, it strikes me down there.
No, it's very rare. I mean, particularly New Zealand, Australians and South Africans have had a culture of having some foreign coaches, but
sure, why would you need them in New Zealand? They're all right.
Well, that's it. And a New Zealand franchise, particularly the Super Rugby winning franchise like the Crusaders, to take Ronan in shows I suppose his quality, and it's really. Stephen Jones mentioned it today in the Sunday Times. Obviously, Crusaders retained their trophy yesterday, so Ronan's now added a Super Rugby title to the top 14 title he won with Racing, plus obviously the success he had as a player. But he actually did an interview during the week in his column, he did a column for the Examiner during the week, and he spoke about, ahead of the final, he just spoke about how the 8 months he spent in New Zealand has been a master's course in coaching in itself, and how so much easier it's been, obviously not having the language barrier, but just what he's been shocked by, I suppose, is the positivity of the head coach there, Scott Robertson, who always believes the team, if they prepare properly, can win, whereas before he would have had self-doubt about, what if the opposition do this, that and the other, whereas they're very much focused on themselves. And big thing for them is developing leadership, and he speaks about the management team always eyeing up leadership potential and developing the same to ensure there's a tier under the main layer of leaders. So traditionally in New Zealand rugby, they go from Crusaders to the All Blacks to Europe or Japan. So they move at the end of their career to Europe to have a foreign experience or to top up their pension fund. So they are very aware of that, and they're always looking at developing that next layer of leadership, and they do it in a formal way. So every Tuesday from 2 to 5, those identified players get their own individual development time, and they bring in leadership specialists. I think it's just an angle. We all speak about having leadership in your squad, but in New Zealand, they're probably ahead of the curve in that they actually formalise that in a weekly part of the plan, and they bring in leadership specialists to develop those traits. And that's why we speak about their maturity under pressure and their ability to stay on task, and a lot of that's down to the fact is that their leadership team are well prepped to deal with those moments when things are going probably against you.
Coming from the Munster culture, I'd imagine O'Gara fits, and particularly the side that he was part of and intrinsic to, he settles in quite well down there.
Yeah, and the Crusaders are probably the franchise that have tapped into the local area. It's obviously Canterbury, it's South Island. They're very humble. There's no airs and graces, and they've got a real, I suppose, attachment to their fan base, which obviously Munster have. And I mean, it's just him obviously winning that yesterday, and then obviously Paul O'Connell this week signing for Stade Francais, and him making his first step into pro coach. And I think both of them are two ex-players who willing to do the hard yards and willing to go and test themselves in different environments to make themselves better coaches.
You were saying your pro licence with Rog?
Yeah, so Rog was very good to me. In France, you have to spend 10 weeks in the French Federation's office to get your pro licence. It's called over there. It's basically your level 5.
This isn't just like a general world rugby. This is in France alone.
France have their own. Yeah, it's 80%. 80%.
It shows you what kind of way he was thinking already. Is that he wants to get boxed off in France?
Yeah, I think in fairness, I think it's really good if you coach in France. Very few foreign coaches do it.
Yeah.
So we were the only 2 foreigners in our class of 25. And they actually really appreciate it because, as I said, most foreigners come there and say, "Oh, we do this, that, and the other. You guys are way behind the times." So if you actually go and learn how they're taught, and understand more about their upbringing, or their rugby culture. It definitely helps you with buy-in, and it's a really good thing to do, to be honest. Because French do a lot of things really well. So he was very good. He put me up because there's digs there on site, but he insisted I stayed with him.
Was it 10 weeks solid, was it?
Yes, no, it's 10 weeks during the season, so it's basically 1 week a month for 10 of the months, Monday to Thursday. So I was lucky enough to stay with him.
Kind of a host, is he?
He's brilliant, yeah, brilliant. And his wife's very good, very good. Cook dinner and tea and biscuits and the whole lot. And just, I got to know him a lot better than I did as a player.
Yeah.
But he's just very deep thinker on the game, and very shrewd. So I'm not surprised. He was very popular in Racing Metro, and I'm not surprised he's settled in really well, and he's re-signed for another year. So
it strikes me that the public Rog and the coach are not entirely two completely different people, but there's a separateness between them.
Yeah, there is, for sure. Yeah. For sure. He's very personable. And he gets players obviously respect him for what he's done as a player, but he's just good at building relationships with players, and I think that's the thing. I mean, Dan Carter came in, and Roger was able to, I suppose, upskill him and get his confidence quickly about how the top 14 is different from Super Rugby, because Dan's first year they won a top 14 title, which obviously Racing obviously have a superstar squad, but that's the only one they've won, and I think if you look at the French players at Racing who've played international rugby, they all speak incredibly highly of him. So he's someone that's obviously on a fast track to he's already successful. I don't know, he's on a fast track to wherever he wants to go.
As regards Paul and Instead, it seems like he was talking about this as being potentially a consultancy thing, but he was like, no, I'm going to throw myself in.
Yeah, they brought in a scrum coach, Peter de Villiers, who played for Stade Francais and played for France, but South African, who was coaching the Springbok scrum. They brought him back, and they were looking at Victor Matfield as a line of consultant, because the head coach is a fellow called Heineke Meyer, ex-Springbok coach, and obviously he knows Victor from having coached him. That fell through. I think Victor potentially will become the next Bulls coach, and Paul obviously spoke to them, and Paul wouldn't be, Paul's not the type of guy who does things half measures and 1 day a week or 2 days a week. Wouldn't. He would struggle with that, I think, in terms of his personality. He's very much committed to anything he signs up to. So again, it's just an opportunity. Stade have had a poor season last year. They've got a very wealthy president. He's the Capri Sun owner, German guy, who's bought Stade Francais and is putting a huge amount of money behind it. So they won the top 14 3 or 4 years ago. They've got a lot of good players. They've had a couple of barren seasons, but the playing staff, and they've signed Maestri, they've signed Fiku, they've kept Mornay Stain. They're on their potential. They're a team who could go places this year in the top 14, but particularly I think will qualify for Europe, and could be a really good opportunity for Paul.
I realise the Irish rugby pool is only so big, but there seems to be an admirable trait amongst those of you who have come from it, that you want to look abroad to try and further yourselves. I mean, it's not just you when you think about it in terms of a coaching setup. Now, obviously, O'Connell's gone over there now to Stade. From a playing perspective, we've seen Ronan, seen Johnny Sexton go over there. Even the Madigans of this world have gone off for themselves. Even gone over to England as well. We've seen players heading over to Wasp.
Yeah, you look at Gervin Dempsey now, has gone to Bath. Mike Prendergast is in Stade Francais now as well.
Conor
O'Shea's in Italy. Mark McCall. The market here is very small, and I think we were all very lucky. Well, I certainly was very lucky to work under some really good foreign coaches, and I think as a player you don't care what nationality the coach is, as long as he's the best guy for the job. So if you want to coach back in Ireland, I think it's a really good thing to do, is to go away and earn your stripes and learn and improve, because that's what the Irish model is. There's no freebies here. They're going to hire the best people. So I think what you're seeing now is the generation who probably played, the first generation to play professional rugby, are looking to get it, because it's very easy to stay in Ireland when you're a player, because of obviously the fact if you want to play for Ireland, you got to stay in Ireland. Whereas the Kiwis, etc., and the Aussies, they tend to get that gap year or 2 years abroad as part of their playing cycle. So if you don't get it as a part of your playing cycle, I think it's good to go and test yourself in foreign climates.
Yeah, it's and Grenoble and Paris are two completely different parts of the world, never mind France. How difficult will it be for the O'Connell family to settle themselves? It seems like something he's wanted to do, given the Toulon move that obviously didn't come to pass.
Yeah, I think he did. He wanted to go and try French rugby. Obviously, unfortunately, he got injured in that World Cup quarter final. I think he's in a really good environment because he's got a foreign head coach. They've got two South Africans head of S&C coaches. They've got Peter de Villiers, who's South African. They've got John McFarland, who's a South African defence coach, who's come back from Japan. They've got Mike. So it's a very foreign-friendly coaching staff, which is going to make it a lot easier. And Paris is obviously a great city to live in, and he's got some, I think they've got 14 or 15 internationals. So
you had it very different.
No, it's not that. It's not. I wouldn't change my experience at all. But I think Paul could go anywhere and settle in. But I do think this is a really exciting move for him because of what's happening in the background in terms of resource and also the history of the club.
A yellow card for John Hanbury in Thurles Galway, leading 1-9 to 7 points. A great piece by David Walsh as well today, David, in the Sunday Times on Eddie Pepperell, the golfer. Just a fantastic insight into the man and to being on tour and to what it takes to stay out there, because it doesn't always go your way, as Pepperell found out, especially when David Walsh was meeting him in a Starbucks, and he was definitely falling out of love with the game, Bernard, as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I just think golf is probably one of those games that we all watch on a Sunday as they go down the home straight and think about how exciting it must be. But I think it challenges people mentally in ways that probably other sports, team sports certainly probably don't regularly. And Eddie Pepperell, David Walsh was interested in him because he started a blog 6 years ago, and he just felt it was one of the most honest blogs he'd read. But he basically fell out of love with the game, and that tied into him losing his tour card in 2016. He spoke about how he actually had to fall out of love with the game, that he had to treat it more as a I suppose a clinical thing. Yeah. And see, I'm going down the golf course for 5 hours. I just need to be the most efficient player I can be, because if you have that love-hate relationship, it's just the mood swings and the peaks and troughs are too high and low. So he seems to have dealt with that, and it's led to him over the last few weeks, pulling in 850,000 between nearly 600,000 prize money at the Scottish Open and $250,000. But it just shows losing his tour card in 2016. He was building a house at the time. His mum, dad, and his wife crying in the hotel room. He only needed to make the cut to keep it. He hit a 64 in the first round, which is the second highest score of the day. Everyone thought it was a formality. In the second day, he needed a par on the 18th, but hit his shot out of bounds and lost his tour card. And I just think that we see these massive figures that the top guys earn, but for a lot of them, it's just a case of trying to win their card every year, and the stress and the need for sponsorship and the mental pressure must be phenomenal. And he seems to have found a way to deal with that, because obviously he's very talented.
And just the insight into him is great. I mean, I looked at my bank account, he says online, and I wanted to send a photo of it to my close friends, not in a bragging way, but in a completely this is effing mad way. I was afraid that even my friends wouldn't take it the right way. I spent £65 on a bottle of red wine, with Jen and I shared. That's a lot on a bottle of wine, but it's the only thing I splashed out on. And that's the kind of sportsman you want, isn't it? He's a humble sort, and comes from a family where his dad Ron worked for Rover, and in his early 40s was made redundant. His next job was managing the clubhouse at Abingdon Town FC. Eddie, his younger boy, would hit golf shots on the pitch. After that, Pep took a job at a driving range. From there, he went on to manage the clubhouse at Drayton Park Golf Club. Nobody ever said Pep took these jobs so his boy could have free range golf balls and the use of the golf course. Eddie though knew that he did.
Yeah, I think that kind of ties in with the sacrifices that other people make to sometimes help these athletes, and then when they become, that pro, sometimes that pressure and feeling that you need to pay back those sacrifices can also add to the stress and the pressure. But he's a guy I hadn't really heard much about, but I certainly he comes across as a very likeable, down-to-earth guy, and hopefully someone who can continue to make waves.
Yeah. What else stuck out for you today, David?
There's a few bits in the Sindo business section. Just going back to football here. It's Simon Rowe. A Dublin-born, well, I'll give you the headline, former Man United executive recruits stars for the Irish Academy plan. So it's a Dublin-born sports marketing expert, has held exploratory talks with the Football Association of Ireland and Irish investors about developing a new elite football academy modelled on the English Football Association's £100 million National Football Centre. So basically it's this fella Mike Farnham, who used to work for Man United as a branding boss from 96 to 2001, and he's got Niall Quinn on board, he's got Brian Kerr on board, so that obviously adds a bit of kudos to it, and also Paul Scholes, which is quite curious. Maybe that's obviously the Man United links. And he's just trying to have talks here about building a 30 million centre to nurture and develop Irish grassroots talent with an eye to boosting national team success. It's only a small story, it's kind of sandwiched in there. And
call me a cynic, David.
See, this is it. As soon as you hear branding and you hear... Yeah. And he has another one in Vietnam as well.
Right.
30 million.
Again, but...
Cynic away.
So, well, like, yeah. It's just something that the FAI should be doing.
Well, this is it. They've held talks, and the FAI are doing it. They have Abbottstown, they have the national training centre out there, they have all their pitches, and they're obviously having discussions here. And
I'm all for getting Brian Kerr involved with young players. I'm 100% all involved.
Well, that's where it could fall down.
Yeah,
we won't go into the details so much on that.
The connection with the FAI might fall down if
exactly. But it's interesting. See what's going to happen over. Like, make a few calls on this and see what's going to happen over the next while. But someone willing to pump €30 million into Irish football, and especially kind of develop Irish grassroots talent. Like they've got the under 13s league now coming up, the 15s, 17s, 19s, trying to develop the League of Ireland a bit more as well. It's interesting to see what happens. Like you, though, a bit cynic here as well in terms of like this is the fellow who was what's his name, Mike Farnan, who was responsible for 100 team branded red cafes across Asia. So that's probably where it is.
Right, fair enough. And there's loads about hurling as well today. We should get to Dermot Crowe's piece before we shoot off too, because it mentions hurling finally becoming an overnight success, he says. But he points back to, and this is where I'd imagine Gaelic football people should probably take heart, talking about a symposium that took place 50 years ago when the riots in Paris and Prague were creating a spirit of revolution. The speaker's remedy at this symposium in GEA was to try and get complete authority for hurling, separate them from football at the time. But at the same symposium, Father Tommy Marr, the acclaimed Kilkenny hurling coach, was keen to make one point absolutely clear. I want to state with all the conviction possible that there is no such thing as a born hurler. In saying this, Father Marr was trying to resolve some of the preciousness and mystery that has always surrounded hurling and stunted its wider growth. If football men used to having it their own way aren't always welcoming, then hurling men can also alienate themselves through excessive self-admiration. He mentioned Ger Loughnane later on the piece in the documentary The Game, talking about how players need to be exposed to hurling at age 5, 6 and no older, because otherwise they're not going to succeed. Overstating the game's technical virtues and discourages more mentors becoming involved, and so on. That mythology needs to be continually demolished, as Father Marr attempted to do. It is one of those things that you need to keep kids involved in as many sports as you possibly can. The idea that a hurler is somebody who grows up in that belt along the Nore is just not necessarily the case. And if the game is to develop outside of these typical hurling strongholds, and of which Clare wasn't one, by the way, up until 20 odd years ago, that people need to be far open-minded about who can get involved in these kind of things.
This is it is an interesting piece. There's a fair bit in it. I can't imagine that it was hailed as a hurling symposium 60 years ago. I think it probably would have been a bit more kind of basic than that, but it's interesting. Like the point I mentioned here about what Ger Loughnane said about you need to be starting at the age of 6 to be a hurler, which
by 6,
which is a bit mental to be thinking like that. Like I was just making a point outside, and it's not really touched on here, and maybe this is just my own sort of failings here, but one of the reasons why I wouldn't have wanted to play hurling growing up is because I was afraid of it. The thought of getting hit by a hurler just had absolutely no appeal to me whatsoever. You try your hand at the guy and obviously play soccer, but like there is that element to it as well where it's a pretty physical sport. I think if you're worried that a child at 7 is afraid to play hurling or doesn't want to play hurling, it's fairly understandable. Like you can I just don't give up on them at the age of 6 or 7.
Just 6 inches to your left, you got a front row forward.
Yeah,
like
talking
about literally bashing his head and shoulders into somebody else.
Bernard made a very stark revelation earlier that you were also.
Well, I know. Well, like I because I didn't play it, I wasn't in an area that it was played growing up. I mean, I much prefer to. I'm much less afraid to play rugby than I would be to play hurling. I think it's what you're exposed to, and I think what. We're talking about hockey and the potential now to drive participation in hockey because of this. I mean, we've just had probably the best season of hurling for a long time, and I think if there is going to be a big investment in terms of spreading the game. It's probably on the back of something like this, but it needs. I think it is a game that needs to be exposed to kids maybe younger early on. But obviously it's getting into what's driven, I suppose, success in a lot of sports has been influence in schools from the headmaster, etc. And I know that the big part of the rugby's success at the moment is the way it's got into schools that weren't traditional and clubs that weren't traditional rugby areas, and everybody's getting an opportunity to play rugby now at a young age. But I think that this is a big opportunity for hurling to try and, I suppose, capitalise on the quality of what we've seen recently and try and get more kids exposed to it.
But the idea of competing sports as well has to go by the wayside, and it's almost not necessarily a throwaway because he mentions it at the start, but Stephen Hunt's piece in the Sneyd today has very much the an entente cordiale attitudes, like why can't we all get along? Because there are enough people to go around, there's enough interest to go around in different things. The last thing one sport needs is to be sniping at another and viewing it as itself above another sport. And that goes for everything.
I think the more different types of sports that kids are exposed to, the better. And eventually then they'll pick the one that they like, or they'll give them all up, but give them the opportunity.
Let them at least watch. I mean, I distinctly remember watching the European Athletics Championships in Split, I think it was in 1990, and going, this is class. These people jump over poles, it's brilliant, and you end up kind of keeping something of it.
It's like it's similar. It's like the hockey, and as I mentioned earlier, like young people growing up with kids will be inspired by that. Might not necessarily be hockey that they end up playing, but they might just see an Ireland team winning a World Cup and just take off from that. On the hurling, like I grew up, and Johnny McCaffrey, solid Lucan man. Like you'd see him coming in kind of in like primary school and in secondary school, and it's one of the things I remember school, and his knuckles and his arms would be in ribbons, and you're thinking, like, how can you put yourself through that at such a young age? And that was one of the things that stands out, that it does feel as if like these fellas putting through, especially at a younger age, an awful lot, and that could be part of the reason why it doesn't maybe kick off, is that it can be quite off-putting for younger people. Stephen Hunt column is actually very good. It's a bit of a 4-in-1 job in terms of he starts off talking about that and you sort of want him to keep on talking about.
I would have loved to have seen Hunty stay on that path, because if he did, that's actually a fantastic piece, because
that's where he's best, when he goes off on one of the.
But he's in a brilliant position to talk about it, because he's from a hurling stronghold and has ended up making a success of himself in football, so he's almost in not a unique position, but he has that perspective on things that he can talk about that with a degree of authority. But instead it's one of those typical Hunty pieces where it goes off.
It's a bit all over the place. But there's in fairness, he makes some good points in the rest of it. He goes from talking about the state of the nation really in terms of sport to Jurgen Klopp and all the rest. But
loads to get through. Most of it we didn't even touch on today. So David Sneyd from the Irish Mail, thanks so much for coming in. And Bernard Jackman, best of luck with this season with the Dragons. I know a big season awaits. I'm sure we will be speaking to you. Your openness that you've alluded to from other sports, we'll be trying to lean on that as the season progresses. We'll be back with more after this. Cheers, lads.
Thank you.
Good day. Oh, jeez. Literally. 6, and then I have to finish pre-recon because I'm doing Tom Dunn show later as well, so I have to suddenly.
Thanks.
Mind yourself, right?
You walk in, Yeah. Walk down here. Leave this here,
Yeah. This would be
good to see it.
You
take it in, see you again
soon, hopefully, right?
No, what?
It's a leg into your studio.
Yeah, we're all sorted. Ross is dialed in on stereo.
Cool, it comes to Dahi first and then to Ross.